I've never on my channel before reviewed a Bible edition. I've left that for my blog and for Amazon and for a couple other places. But Crossway recently sent me a really beautiful edition of the Bible, of the ESV, of course. It is the ESV Preaching Bible verse by verse edition. Let me hold that up in the light where it can be seen. And the key elements I'll just run down through as I recommend this Bible to those who like verse by verse editions. I'll save that for last. I actually don't like verse by verse editions, but I don't blame those who do. Let me talk about the rest of the Bible. The binding is awesome. Some people go really deep into their Bible bindings and they get the very best of, whatever leather is out there. This is goat skin. It's black, it's supple. I'm not super picky about this, but this is great. It is, oh, so good smelling. Feels perfect in the hand. It's so elegant on the side with these little raised bumps right here. I'm a big fan. And when I open it up, the first things that I notice as a longtime Bible reader who has real interest in Bible typography is that we've got a lot of the classic elements that have developed, well, boy, I say they're classic, they are, they've lasted a long time, but they kind of went into eclipse. The typographic elements that I prefer in a good Bible edition are, for example, single column. Now, I'm not going to be doctrinaire about this. I'm not going to say that double columns are somehow evil or wicked, or that everybody ought to toss out their double column Bibles. Those do serve a purpose. Double columns are best at economizing. So if you want to have a small Bible, you're going to want to have double columns. And there are many reasons to have a small Bible, one that you can keep in your bag or even in your pocket, like a friend of mine used to do year after year. Sans serif fonts can also be smaller and allow that. But this is not what this Bible is for. It's not supposed to be small. You're not supposed to carry it around with you in your shirt pocket unless you are Hagrid. And none of the Harry Potter books ever mention him reading the Bible, so I'm not sure that he would actually use the ESV either. But the single column, what it does is it allows you, in my estimation, to stick with the most common conventions that readers are used to, and therefore to do the best kind of reading, okay? Contextually sensitive reading, watching for where the context has gone and where it's going. That's what I like for my single column Bibles. But the way this deviates, and I said I'd get to verse by verse last, and we will get there last, but I'll just mention it now, is that it's not broken up the text here into paragraphs per se, not visual paragraphs. It has little paragraph symbols and it has headings. You can see the portion for the prince right here in this portion of Ezekiel. Or I'll flip over to the New Testament, and just like other ESVs, you've got Peter's sermon at Pentecost as a heading, and later in the passage here in Acts 3, the fellowship of the believers. So that is a kind of paragraph division that you can see at a glance on the page. But in order to keep the verse numbers in on the left-hand column so that preachers can find them quickly while they're speaking to people, they have not put the Bible text into conventional paragraphs. The paper is nice and bright white. I've had a couple ESVs, including the main one that I use. It's a little yellower, and I don't prefer that as much. And I do feel like I'm not a scientifically oriented person who, in this respect, who can tell you what the GSM number is, how opaque is the paper. But my feel is that this is more opaque than the single column heirloom legacy Bible that I was given, that I still use for preaching. It was given when I left Greenville, South Carolina to come out to Washington State. This Bible, like many others, I want to say most others in the last, 5 or so years, has line matching so that the front and back of each page, you can actually see when you look through, the lines are matched on either side of the page so that you don't get as much ghosting. When they're not matched, you can kind of see in between the lines, you can see the type on the back side of the page. So that's really helpful for clarity. A lot of the other just beautiful classic typographic elements that the ESV has been known for, like the use of the font Lexicon by the Dutch designer Bram de Doos. I do not know how to pronounce that, but I love lexicon. Ever since it came out in the ESV Study Bible back in, I want to say, 2008, I was absolutely smitten. I've had typographically oriented friends who've complained a little bit. Lexicon was made for dictionaries, and I guess they don't think it's elegant enough. I think it's absolutely perfect for the Bible, and I've never gotten tired of it. There are fonts in Bibles from back in the 80s that I now look on as just being dated. I don't know the way lexicon is going to look in the future, but I suspect, here's my little prophecy, I suspect this one's going to last a long time. It's just the fruit of where typography, or it's where the tradition of typography of this kind, elegant, classical, useful, small, has gone. I say small because it was made for lexicons, it's made for dictionaries, and that means it has a small X height. That means that you can make out the letters even when they're small. And I'm 40, I'm just getting to the stage I'm told where I should maybe need reading glasses after a while. And this type, which is 9.75 point, is just fine. It's just fine for me. I could be in the pulpit, absolutely, using this type, and I would have no problem viewing it. Let's talk then about the verse-by-verse-ness. Apparently, there are lots of Bible readers, especially pastors, and that's why this is a preaching Bible. So elegant. This is a really nice box. I still keep my single column heirloom legacy Bible in its box to protect it, and I think that's what everybody should do. I was taught that by my pastor in South Carolina. Apparently, there are a lot of preachers who really do like to have every verse starting on a new line so that they can easily find their place when they are preaching. I have just never needed that, and honestly never liked it. Because while I am preaching, even though I've done my prep, and for me, typically, I have manuscripted everything, and I'm looking down. Maybe not ideal, it's just the way I do things. I still am doing some interpreting while I'm reading the text out loud. I want to be continually reminded where I am in the context. I want to be forced to be reminded of what came before and what came after. And I think it would be doctrinaire for me to say that if you use a verse-by-verse Bible, you're going to misinterpret. No, come on, not true. That would be arrogant to say. I think I could make the lesser claim, which is still pretty expansive, that collecting Bible verses into paragraphs the way normal prose does, and the way my favorite ESV edition does, the one I use, I think it's better, more apt to help you read the Bible with contextual sensitivity. I think that's important enough that I get just annoyed when I look at a verse-by-verse edition. But here's the deal. The ESV folks, the Crossway folks, whose work is just sterling. I mean, come on. They have changed the game in Bible publishing since the ESV first came out when I was in seminary, just starting seminary in 2001, and my first edition of the ESV, my roommate borrowed it and spilled tea on it. Still like him, it's okay. We worked it out. He let me have his crunchy peanut butter, the natural kind. I never had it before, and I ate way too much of it, so we're totally even here. Even back then, it really was a cut above. And then pretty soon they started putting out all kinds of editions, innovative, useful, different kinds of Bible editions. And it sparked a renaissance, in my estimation. Now there are typefaces that are made just for Bibles. My friends over at 2K Denmark, I got to meet at the Bible Tech Conference in 2015, have done a Bible type that's gone into a number of editions and different translations. I'm so grateful that Crossway has upped the game. And I was told that way back when, a couple years back, how long has it been now? 2014 or so, that they put out a reader's edition of the ESV. My work on the Bible Typography Manifesto, which was tongue-in-cheek but also serious, actually had an impact on their doing that, and now multiple translations have beautiful reader's editions where there are no verse numbers at all. That really is my preferred way to read the Bible. It just isn't possible in our current Christian culture for churches to use readers' Bibles, although that is my future dream. Be warned, members of my own church, uh, any church I might pastor in the future. I would like to try that for a year or 2 years, just see how it goes. What would expository preaching be like if we didn't have verse numbers? I have some thoughts about that. I have some hopes that it would actually do something good. But the Crossway folks have done such an excellent job with all these editions. And they've shown that they're really sensitive to the need for readers to have visual cues in the text, letting them know what's going on. So, given the constraints of a verse-by-verse edition, where you have to start every single verse on its own new line, which again, I just don't personally like. I'm going to be giving this away to some person who needs it and wants it. They've done the best that you can do at still communicating visually where the breaks in the thought flow are. I have a friend who does excellent graphic design, and if you need a website, Dan Beltecki, who is over in Romania but went to college in the States, does an excellent job. He actually designed my blog. Even though I'm a graphic designer, a web designer on the side, I let him do it because he's so good at it. And his website design firm is called Made by Pilcrow. What is a Pilcrow? It's Alt-7 on the Mac keyboard, and it's this little symbol, I'll show it to you, that looks like a backwards P with 2 lines for the stem, and the whole of the P is filled in totally black. That's a paragraph symbol. I think that most people don't know that, and I therefore don't think that having the Pilcrow symbol is sufficient way of communicating where paragraph breaks should be. Unfortunately, a lot of New American Standard Bible editions, I think most of them, rely on the Pilcrow to let people know where the paragraph is. I just don't think that works. A lot of times, too, they'll bold the first verse number of a paragraph. That's not done in the Crossway editions. That's done often in NASB editions. That, too, I just don't think it's enough of a visual cue to let you know, okay, here's where the thought break is, here's where we're moving on to something different. So I like the fact that the ESV, though they're using, in this case, they're using Pilcrows, and they'll have several of them in one section. Still, usually the headings and little breaks before them will give you a visual cue, at least on the, I don't know, maybe the 100-foot level, not the 10,000-foot view, but the 100-foot view. Whereas the paragraphs are more like a 30-foot elevation view over the text, and that's what I prefer. But given the constraints of a verse-by-verse edition, Crossway has done the very best possible. I hope that's helpful. I love Crossway, and I just want to see them succeed. And they did send me this. I didn't have to pay a cent for it, but naturally, as with all my reviews, I will never recommend something that I don't actually recommend. And when I get something nice like this, I am generally looking for somebody to give it to. So hopefully there's somebody out there who could really use it and get in contact with me. And now I think I'll burn up all the comments with that invitation. Let me know if you'd like me to do any Bible reviews in the future. I see other YouTubers doing it. It's not my usual style, but I love Crossway and the ESV so much. It is, if I have to pick one, it's my main Bible. It's the one that I preach from, and I choose to preach from when I have the option, and it's the one that I influenced my church to get. Let me just say a word about that, because this channel is dedicated so much to questions about which Bible translation is best. I do not think the ESV is the best Bible translation. I would never say that about any translation. There is no best Bible translation. I think it is the best Bible translation for my church's needs, for its official use translation. But I sure hope other people in my church, and I think they are, I know they are, reading other translations. I'm about to give out the Net Bible to somebody at my church. Actually, to 2 somebodies. Got some nice copies of that. I'm about to give out a copy of the NIV. Actually, I think I might have 2 or 3 copies of the NIV to give out in a nice reader's edition to people. We do not use one Bible translation exclusively, and I urge my people insofar as I can, as an almost assistant pastor, I urge them not to read only one Bible translation. So why did we pick the ESV as the main one? Well, I'm not the senior pastor, so I can't give all his reasons, but I think I can represent him, and I know I can represent my own viewpoint. That would be, what is a conservative? A conservative, going back to Burke, is somebody who recognizes that in general, you probably ought to change as little as possible in the complex machinery of human institutions. If you like those institutions and what they're delivering to you, then probably you don't want to tamper too much with the DNA of those things. You know, my friends in the King James only world might be shocked to hear me say that, because they're saying, then why are you trying to get us to change from the King James Version? Well, you'll have to watch other videos of mine and read my book to figure that one out. But how do we change as little as possible of what's been successful for conservative, English-speaking, evangelical, Protestant, in my case, Baptistic and Reformed, independent churches? Well, the King James tradition has served us incredibly well. What is the King James tradition? Well, it's a set of choices. It's a set of, hundreds of thousands of choices in different passages that the ESV pretty well sticks with. It's not radically departing from the King James tradition. It does use a different textual basis, and some people think that's a radical departure. I absolutely do not. The textual basis of the ESV, in my estimation, is just a part of the very same tradition of which the Textus Receptus that underlies the King James is a part. There is not a radical departure. The simple fact is the two texts are not very different, and if you don't believe me, you can go to my website, kjvparallelbible.org, and see for yourself. But sticking with the basic set of interpretive choices and there's my local train, comes right by my house, that the King James has made, that's done well for churches. So fine, stick with it. What else has done well for churches, in my estimation, is a basically formal, and sometimes called literal, though I think that's misleading, approach to Bible interpretation. There's sort of a center of gravity for translations whether they will lean over toward the making more interpretive decisions for you versus leaning over toward forcing you to enter into the biblical world in order to understand. And that's what the King James tradition has done in general. They certainly have their places where they're more interpretive and even paraphrastic, like God save the king or God forbid. There's these classic phrases and examples like that in the King James. But the ESV and the King James tend to stick toward this more formal/literal side. And I think that for most middle class, generally high school educated, some college educated churches in the U.S., that tradition has proven itself to be valuable. For those who are reaching others, like I did, who were functionally illiterate, or who just are coming from an ESL background or something, I don't see any problem with going to the NIV or the CSB. That seems to have won a lot of plaudits in the last several years. There are a lot of good options, but that's why we went with the ESV, and I thought I'd toss that in there along with the review of this excellent Preacher's Edition. Let me show the box one more time of the ESV that I highly recommend and will be giving out to somebody soon.